I think you can learn a lot of things upon reading a Grady Hendrix book. Like, for example, this one. You too can learn how to be a groovy witch. Hey, what's up, bookworms? Mike back today to talk a little horror on the channel, and today it is the 9th release novel by Grady Hendrix. This is Witchcraft for Wayward Girls. Brand new, just came out here this previous month, and I want to thank Berkeley and NetGalley for sending me a review copy here for exchange for an honest review, and that's what you're going to get from me every single time. So this is my third Grady Hendrix book, guys. I have read the book club's Southern Book Club's Guide to Slaying Vampires, and I read My Best Friend's Exorcism. I love My Best Friend's Exorcism. Thought that Southern Book Club was just okay. So this is kind of what I'm considering the rubber match, if it were. In case you don't know, that's basically best 2 out of 3. And so if this one falls on the amazing side, yeah, Grady Hendrix is going to become an appointment reading author for me. If it doesn't, it's going to be one of those, hey, well, we'll see what happens. So how did it turn out? Well, we're going to talk about that today, guys. But we're going to begin by talking about what is Witchcraft for Wayward Girls about. Well, they call them wayward girls, loose girls, girls who grew up too fast, and they're sent to the Wellwood home in St. Augustine, Florida, where unwed mothers are hidden by their families to have their babies in secret, give them up for adoption, and most important of all, to forget any of it ever happened. 15-year-old Fern arrives in the home in the sweltering summer of 1970, pregnant, terrified, and alone. Under the watchful eye of the stern Miss Wellwood, she meets a dozen other girls in the same predicament. There's Rose, a hippie, who insists she's going to find a way to keep her baby and escape to a commune. Zinnia, a budding musician who knows she's going to go home and marry her baby's father. And Holly, a wisp of a girl, barely 14, mute, and pregnant by no one knows who. Everything the girls eat, every moment of their waking day, and everything they're allowed to talk about is strictly controlled by the adults who claim to know what is best for them. Then Fern meets a librarian who gives her an occult book about witchcraft, and power is in the hands of the girls for the first time in their lives. But power can destroy as easily as it creates, but it's never given freely. There's always a price to be paid, and usually it is paid in blood. This brings us to the 9th book by Grady Hendrix, guys. This is Witchcraft for Wayward Girls. Let's begin like usual. Let's talk about what makes the book good here. For me, I think his slice of life moments are really the best moments in this book. I think he does some really good character moments. And the way that he shows these girls kind of grow, first they're kind of standoffish. Obviously, this is a very, very sensitive situation. And a lot of these girls that have been there before, they think they're a little territorial, rare, that happens, it's going to happen. And I think he writes that really well, showing them reluctantly at first kind of growing together. And by time, they go over time, they become more than friends. They become like a sisterhood. And I think that's very, very important. He does that very, very well. It made me think of Mike Flanagan's adaptation of Midnight Club on Netflix. So you have a bunch of people who are coming together, don't have much time left, So in this, they're pregnant instead of obviously with terminal illness. So, they're going to be together a short time, but, they make a profound impact on each other's lives, in a short amount of time. And I think that's a really nice way to set things up. He does that stuff really, really good. The bonds that grow between them are just excellent. I love that stuff. Some of the character backgrounds are really good too. Like you get just snippets here and there about how they got in this situation. And you're kind of wondering as a reader, are they putting the other ones on? Is this what really happened? But I think when you get a couple of the characters like backstories, it's really tragic and it's really, really sad and scary. And it's something that that people had to deal with in their lives, and it makes it all the more real. And that's what I'll say about this. That's what Grady does the best about this, is he's that type of a writer that writes a little bit about social issues, yes, but he writes them through the lens of the way that things are going in that time period. He does that really, really well here, because a Wayward Girl in the year 1970, it was quite different than today. You would have, you say you have an unwanted pregnancy and you're a teenager, the family rallies together, and they say, we're going to figure this out. Back then, it's like you were shunned, and I think he doesn't shy away from that. I think it's really good to show that way that things were not that long ago, if you really think about it. So, I mean, me being 46 years old, I like to say 1970 wasn't that long ago, was it? But I love those things. And the Witchcraft is pretty fun. It is a little bit, not as much in here as you would want, I think. But when the witchcraft does happen, it's pretty fun. Made me think of the 1994 cult classic, pun intended, The Craft. You remember the guys? Remember that movie, The Craft? It makes me think a lot of that. So a good marriage of Midnight Club by Mike Flanagan and The Craft, the movie, which is just awesome. It's really, really good 90s movie if you guys haven't seen it. At least it is in my memory. I don't know if you go back to it, but I got several times where I thought about that movie while reading this book. I think it does a really good job of driving home that point of, hey, blood oaths and black magic, it's not a joke. And if you make a pact, you don't just get to be a grumpy little teenager and stomp your foot and walk away and say it's not fair and just run off. It doesn't work that way. A pact is a pact, and I think it's good that he doesn't let his characters off the hook that easily. It's something I struggle with a lot in modern fantasy. Is a character will just be like, well, this is the way it's always been, but I'll just throw a tantrum and I'll get away with it. No, it doesn't work like that. When you make a blood oath, it's in blood. It's real. It's a real deal here. But I think that some of the horrific elements in here, that's obviously what I come to horror for. It's gross, but he writes it very well. There are several, obviously, delivery scenes in this book, and he puts you in the driver's seat, so to speak, and it's messed up. It'll make you cringe more than not. And I mean cringe in a good way, like horror. I mean, you're reading horror, you're expecting to be disturbed a little bit, and I think he does that really well. There's one particular birthing scene where, let's just say it's a little supernatural, and it's messed up. It was really, really sinister, and I thought that was probably one of my favorite horrific parts of this book. And I think that's the thing is, again, he's not that type of writer that's going to scare the pants off of you, but he will make you grip the armchair a couple times or kind of want to look away from the page and kind of cover your eyes a little bit while you're reading. I think he does that again in this book. So yeah, one birthing scene really had me ready to hurl. And I mean that in a good way. And it's a little thing, but I think he has clear respect for sci-fi fantasy classics. Like he mentions several titles in this book that I'm like, okay, he's doing that Stephen King thing right now. He's just mentioning all the books that he loved reading when he was a kid. And I appreciate that. As a bookworm and someone who just loves the genre, it's really cool to see hat tips to things like that. Just books that, start to maybe get forgotten about over time. And the only way they're kind of kept alive is by people of a certain generation telling them to the younger generation about it. So he seems to be like the it author right now. Anytime he has a release, it's a big deal. And a lot of younger readers are reading him. So if he can influence younger readers to check out some of these things that came before, that's a great thing. That's always a great thing. So what makes it, I hate to say the word bad, but maybe not good? And these are things that maybe will work for you. They didn't really work for me, but I want to make you aware of them here. Around the halfway point, I think the best character leaves the story. And I think therein lies the problem with this whole book, is Fern, as the main protagonist, about as exciting as dry toast. She's probably the worst character in the book. And I don't mean it in like a I hate her way. I mean it in like an indifference way. Like she could leave the story and I'd be like, that's okay with me. It's fine. Didn't care one way or the other. And you kind of miss the boat a little bit, I think, if your main character, your narrator, the voice of the story is not that interesting. Now, a lot of people will look at that and say, hey, that character is just there to be the eyes for all these other characters. You got to make them somewhat interesting, I think. They can't just be a boring blank avatar, and I feel like Fern is extremely boring, extremely, and I don't know. There's something about it just never really clicked for me. I found all the other girls way more interesting than her, and I wanted more of them and less of her, honestly. And you get plenty of those, but again, it's one of those things, you deal with these girls who are having pregnancies, and obviously the baby's going to come, and then they leave the home. So some of those characters are going to leave the story. Unfortunately, when several of those characters leave the story, it's not that exciting anymore. So it's one of those where I really thought that the way that he shows these bonds growing between these girls is really, really good. All the slice of life stuff is terrific. But the actual main plot of the story, it's pretty mid to me. It didn't really grab me that much. And I think it's probably because, I will admit, with a title like this, I was expecting some big-time black magic mojo. And it doesn't really happen, guys. There's probably only a couple of spells in the whole story. And them looking at a book a couple times, that's really it. So again, if that's what you're expecting in a Grady Hendrix book, I think you'll go in this and you'll be happy. But if you're wanting, the big old black magic witch showdown, not so much. I mean, the main story kind of just comes down to, the coven, this witch coven wants this one particular girl at the home, and it's what they'll do to stop it or protect her. And that's fine. That's fine. But again, if you're here for the witchcrafting, you're probably going to leave a little disappointed. And I think around the halfway point, all the mojo for this book just kind of went downhill for me. I wasn't really as interested. I did finish it. I never felt like I was wanting to quit or DNF or anything, but I did feel like it was front heavy. And I think that's more because the characters I was really enjoying left the story. And that is just a bummer. So why should you read it, guys? Well, obviously, like I said, Grady seems to be the new it horror author. Every time he has a new release out, there's a buzz about it. Everyone's going to read it. Look at me. I'm reading. I didn't do the thing where I'm like, I got to read every book by this author before I can read a new release. No, I went ahead and went to pick one up at release day and kind of experience a Grady Hendrix release week and see what that was like, you know. And I think that I understand why people love him. The thing about him is he finds a way to take a social issue and put it through the lens of an earlier time period. So 3 books I've read by him now have taken place in the 70s, the 80s, and the 90s. And he will take you on that ride and show you, not in like a member berries, hey, here's what things were like the 70s, 80s, 90s. It's not like that. It isn't the nostalgia horror where it's just like, hey, here's all these things you loved when you were a kid. He puts it more in like, this is the way that society was in that time period, and more specifically, how it was to young girls. And I think that's important. It is very much important. But if that's something that you're into, I think you will want to read it. If it's something you're not really having, it might not be the book for you. He's an above average character writer, I think. I'm always on board with his characters. In all 3 books now, I've had characters in a story that I'm rooting for, that I want to follow. This is the first time the one missed the mark for me, really, with the main character. But again, I don't think it ruins the story, if that's possible, saying like the main protagonist isn't that interesting. But I might be alone. I'm looking at some of the reviews for this, and it seems mixed. Some people love Fern. Some people are indifferent about Fern. So I think that your mileage is going to vary on that one. But if you're looking for, you know, all those things I mentioned, you know, all the issues and all the way that life is really, really hard for these young girls in this situation, yes, it's going to be a book for you. If you're looking for the witchcrafting, there's probably better books for you out there. It's kind of what I said about Lightfall recently. If you're there for those things, you'll like it. If you want to be there for the werewolves and the vampires, not so much. So again, it's one of those where you kind of, if you judge the book by its cover, you're probably not going to get what you want. So again, I think that's just kind of the style that Grady Hendrix does right. And that leads me to my final thoughts. I call this one a mix to neutral for me. It's my least favorite of the 3 books that he's read so far. I'm sorry, that I've read so far, that he's written so far. It's lots of reviewers say it starts too slow, but for me, that was the best part. I love character relationships. That's my favorite thing. I'm a character reader first. And I thought the characters were set up really, really well. Execution towards the end, maybe not so much, but I still loved all those characters except Fern, honestly. So, I mean, I don't think you can do that if you're not a really good character writer, I think. But the main plot for me was just, it was fine. It was nothing that was really exciting, nothing that felt new, nothing that hadn't been done before and done better, you know? So, of the 3 Hendrix books, like I said, this is a clear last place. I go, my best friend's exorcism was just great. Southern Book Club's guide, it lingered on some things a little too long, but still, overall, I enjoyed my time there. This one, it's one of those forget about it after you finish reading it the next day kind of things. And the epilogue had me like just face palming, like, are you serious right now? I don't regret reading it, but you know, it's got me to the point where I'm like, okay, I said it was a rubber match. Does that mean I'm not going to be reading Grady Hendrix anymore? No, I'm going to continue to read Grady Hendrix. He's an author that I do like, and I will read again. I do think he's a good enough writer. Again, he's a good enough character writer that I want to read his stories. I just don't think he's going to become an appointment author. Well, I've got to make sure I circle on the calendar when that new release is coming out because I've got to read it like immediately. Like I said, his style of horror seems to very much be, I want to talk about this social issue and put it through the lens of a different time period and let you guys know what it was like back then. Again, I think that's important stuff to talk about. It really, really is. And I think horror is going to be one of the most subjective genres in all of fiction. It really is. It does seem like there's a little bit of something different for everyone, what everyone likes, what scares you, or what you're into. For me, I still like to feel not really scared, because I guess I always say at some point in life, you can't really get scared by a book. But does the book make me uncomfortable? Does it make me, you know, see that train's coming and I just can't do anything to stop it? That's how I like my horror. I don't like it as much to be the commentary. You know, I think there is room for things like that. Hello, Stephen King is my favorite author of all time. He does it every single book. But he keeps the main thing the main thing. And I think sometimes Grady can struggle with that a little bit. And he can kind of get distracted and really, really go all in on, you know, some issue that he's very upset about. And again, I think there is a place for that in fiction. There really is. There's a way to do it. To me, when you let it take over your main story, though, it can be kind of a drag. And I've seen in 3 books now, I feel like that kind of seems to be his style. And sometimes it works, like in my best friend's exorcism. Sometimes maybe not so much, like in Witchcraft for Wayward Girls. So again, that's how I feel about it. I will definitely read more. I've got 4 or 5 books left on my Kindle by Grady Hendrix that I haven't read yet. So I'll probably go back and visit some of those eventually. I know I've had so many mixed things told me about horror stories. Some people say it's great, some people say it's awful. You know, and I think that's just the kind of author he is. Like I said, the way that he writes his horror, it's not going to be for everyone, I don't think. But for me, if you're doing good enough character work, I can oversee a lot of that other stuff and say I really am interested because I want to follow these characters. And in all three books, I think he's wrote character relationships really well. That's something I think he's going to be just kind of a constant with. And that's good news. That's good news because the horror genre can use better character work, I do believe. And I think he's doing a good job there. So this one might have been somewhat of a miss for me. It's something I say, if you've liked his previous books, I would recommend it. I think you would like it. But of the three that I've read, it's a big gap between 2 and 3 for this one. So there we go, guys. That was my thoughts on Witchcraft for Wayward Girls. I'd love to know what you guys think about it. Will you be reading the next Grady Hendrix book? I probably will. I don't know. I never say never on this channel, but I won't be doing it with the same excitement, I don't think, unless I read something else before then and get really, really excited. I want to chase that high of My Best Friend's Exorcism again, which was just so good. I wonder if he's got another one of those in him, or is he one of those where his first pitch was his best pitch? Yeah, we'll see. So drop in the comments, guys. Let me know what you thought about Witchcraft for Wayward Girls. I will talk to you there.